What is life? Why am I here? How is it all connected? And how am I going to navigate this beautiful but crazy journey? I'm Sylvia and welcome to the Soul Sunshine podcast. Today I'm talking to Dan Kurlapski. Dan is a leadership and integral development coach, a meditation teacher and a lover of nature and adventure. He runs the organization Yes and, the Yes and Festival, meditation programs, retreats and the Yes and's Arctic leadership adventures. Over the years, he has helped many transcend their preconceptions and limiting beliefs, helping people to reach their potential to live a more fulfilled life true to themselves. Welcome to the Soul Sunshine podcast, Dan. It's so awesome to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sylvia.
It's been a long time coming. I've had you on my list since I started this podcast, so I'm very excited that we're sitting here today.
Now we're finally here. How good.
Yeah, and when I'm saying here, we're actually on Zoom today because you have relocated to Byron in northern New South Wales about a year ago, I think, which is beautiful.
Yeah, we're super fortunate to be living where we're living at the moment, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Then today we are going to be talking about your story, why you were initially drawn to self-development and how you have found your own way into coaching. We're going to be talking about how this has changed your life and your outlook on life profoundly, the difference between living from love versus living from ego, and how we can all connect to the true essence of ourselves and live from a state of more ease. So then we met a little bit over a year ago now, almost 18 months ago, I would say, when you were preparing for the Yes and Festival last year through Digital Storytellers. And I guess, yeah, we've been in contact ever since, because from the very first time I got in contact with you guys, I've been just very drawn to the work that you're doing and how you are helping and supporting people. So yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation today.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, you know, that year definitely feels like, or at least 5 years in that sense. So much has happened in the last 12 months, 14, 15 months. But, you know, coming together for that festival was something really, really special. And we appreciate the ongoing support from yourself and Digital Storytellers in a big way. Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure to be part of the community and to be part of what you guys are doing. Yeah, I also wanted to mention at this point, I've also been fortunate enough to talk to your beautiful partner, Sarah, in the podcast already. So if anybody wants to listen back to that, it was episode 5, and we were talking about consciousness and the next phase of human evolution. So the reason why I'm mentioning that right now is because some of those things might come up today in our conversation as well. So if people want to go back and get a bit more of a deeper look into that topic, they can do that.
Some of those things actually tend to come up in our Sunday morning wake up. so
I'm sure they do.
I'm not surprised that it was by no means a light conversation between you and Sarah, and you went quite deep. So beautiful conversation, that one. Yeah.
It was a really awesome conversation. Yeah, I really loved that. But now here we are then. It's time for our conversation today. So let's start it with, tell us a little bit about your background and also where did your story of self-development start? And I guess what was it that first sparked your interest in this topic?
Interesting one. So I've always, when I say always, for a long time, from being, you know, maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, I was the type of child that would sit around and just people watch and observe humans doing what they do and wondering why they do what they do in that sense. And, you know, whenever this question gets asked as to where it all started, the earliest moments really, I probably have to put down to my father positively conditioning me by placing me in front of many different films that really laid the groundwork for a, you know, never say die attitude very early on in my life in that sense. So, you know, I was 5, 6 years old watching Bruce Lee, Cool Runnings, The Karate Kid, all of these movies that really put that same mindset in. And, you know, at that point in time, I was playing a lot of football, soccer, and applying it to that. And I was inspired by people that had the capacity and determination and commitment to see what they wanted to go for and went for it in that sense. And my first ever coach that I had, whilst it wasn't a traditional life coach, it was a one-on-one football coach, was at the age of 16. And he had taught me many, many lessons that at that point in time were supposed to be lessons to improve my football, but they are lessons that I've continued to carry forward. Little things such as what you focus on expands, right? And that might be something positive that you choose to focus on, and so it will expand. And if you focus on it, you will feed it. But the same goes for a bad pass that I may have done. And if I focus on that bad pass, then by the end of the game, it would probably end up being a game where I would have said, yeah, I did that bad pass, and then everything else just went wrong because I continued to feed that. And it's so simple, yet so profound. And to realize that in every moment, we have the choice as to what we are feeding with our attention. And what we are placing our attention on is what will be fed and what will expand in our lives. So simply choose what we want that to be. And, people might often say, well, I don't exactly know what I want to bring into my life. And so if that's the case, completely okay, right? The present moment is a beautiful place to start as to where we place our attention, and to choose to focus there and to allow that present moment to be something that expands within our lives. So yes, I was 16. It was also the time where I'd picked up my first self-help book, if we can call it that, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I was in year 10, 15 years old actually, and I was really taken aback by one of the pages where there was a university study, and they got a classroom to split in two and showed both halves of the classroom the same image, which was an image of a woman, and they described to half of the classroom the image of the woman that looked quite young. She could have been a 23-year-old with a pearl necklace and beautiful feather in her hair. And then the exact same image could be described, and was described, to the other half of the classroom as an 80, 90-year-old babushka woman, where the chin of the younger woman was all of a sudden the nose. And so they were seeing this older woman, then they brought the two halves of the classrooms together and asked them to discuss what they could see in this one image. And there was just conflict in perspectives. What do you mean you're seeing a grandma? I'd take this lady out on a date, 23 years old, attractive woman. They're like, what? What are you talking about? And so I'd go to school from that point onwards and sit there at lunchtimes observing conversations being had, fascinated by the fact that two people having a conversation about the exact same thing were seeing something different. Even if it was slightly different, they were seeing it from their perspective, from where they were standing. And that fed the already keen interest I had in human behavior. And yeah, I did go down the path of I did my exercise science degree and did my master's in physiotherapy, and then, worked at high level sport as a physiotherapist. And from there opened up a clinic with my now business partner, Michael Risk, where we have a beautiful team with beautiful team culture and so on. But when we opened that up, my sort of projection into the future as to how I wanted to live my life was 3 days working as a physiotherapist, running the business, and that would give me 4 days to grow up with the kids I might one day have. And, it was probably 3 years into that where I had asked myself the question, am I passionate about physiotherapy? And the answer was no. And a lot of people like, what do you mean? You just spent 5 years at university investing that time and lots of money that is still being paid off in that sense. $80,000 actually, like in total for 5 years in total. So for a degree that, now I'm not at all working in, right? But I realized, there was a reason why I got into that in the first place. And what was it about physiotherapy that I was really attracted to and really gave me an opportunity and avenue to utilize, my skills and what I liked to do and what I was good at doing. And that was working with humans, working with people, and getting on the same page in regards to back then it was all about goals and expectations, and then seeing those people, creating a space and facilitating a space where those people could apply to self and take what was maybe secondhand knowledge that I may have been providing to them and offering up my perspective and so on, taking that, trying it on for themselves again and again and again and again to turn it into first-hand knowledge and experience, and then really carving out their own path. And, it was in the realm and setting of physiotherapy, it was often getting back to the sport that they loved doing, and that was important. But why was that important? Well, it really had them feel good and placed them in a state of mind that was quite positive and so on. And why was that important? Well, actually, because it then meant that I had less stress around work and less stress at home. And why was that important? Well, then I became a nicer person to be around at home. It was often the story, right? And so, I realized I can do this in physio and I can do it beyond physio as well. And coaching, I started to explore that, and what does that actually mean, and is there a regulatory board somewhere? But that started my journey there. So it wasn't too long after that where I kind of thought, okay, well, if I'm really to be an example of the fact that anyone can learn anything, no matter how scared we are of it, no matter how bad we are at any given time, we can learn anything we want to. And so I set out on sort of personal challenge for myself, which is 52 new experiences in 52 weeks. And that was simply to do anything that scared the shit out of me, anything that I really sucked at, and anything that was just incredibly challenging mentally or physically or intellectually, such as I started to learn a language. I attended university without actually enrolling because I didn't really want the degree. I just went for one semester of French to simply learn for a semester. And I had a friend that was a tutor, so she let me into the classrooms and I did all the exams, but I didn't receive any official marks or whatever. So there was that. There was learning how to ride a unicycle in the space of 4 days and removing frustration from the process because it's actually not necessary and slows down the process because we're going to suck at the beginning. And then we get a little bit better as we move from the cognitive thinking about doing something a lot because we're so unfamiliar with it to the associative stage where we're a little more familiar with it, into the autonomous stage of learning, which is, now I've got it. But no one drops into the autonomous stage. Some people with some different skills, with some different professions will move through those phases quicker, but those same people have skills and things that they would move through slower. But we all move through them and frustration only slows that down. So that was one hell of a year. 52 new experiences in 52 weeks. And one of the standout ones was definitely improvisation theatre. I only wanted to do one class and I was going to count that as my new experience. In that first class, what I had learned was a core concept and principle of improv theatre. And improv theatre is you standing on stage with other people with no script whatsoever. A very similar situation to what the entire world had found themselves in and what we still find ourselves in, where we are on this stage here, COVID's playing out, no script whatsoever. How do we respond? Yeah. And so the core principle was yes and, which was to say yes to all offers that are presented to you on stage or by life and contribute to it with your own contribution. Yeah. And what that allows for, it allows for flow on stage rather than a jarring stop-start happening on stage between the people on there. It really allows for flow. And as I was learning that and sort of being exposed to that, it felt really true about many aspects of life. Hey, I could apply that to my thoughts, to say yes to it and let it flow on. I could apply it to my emotions, apply it to relationships, apply it to business, running a business, apply it to life in general. And then, I was really fascinated. And that one improvisation theatre turned into 30 weeks worth of improv that year, whilst I was still doing the other experiences, until I got to perform with a whole bunch of other awesome humans on stage in front of 200 other people And, I wasn't confident at all at that sort of stuff. In high school, year 11 and 12, I would look at all the kids doing drama and be incredibly envious of it, thinking, you guys were just born with that confidence. And so, yeah, it was a standout for sure.
What I'm thinking when you're talking about yes and as well is it's really interesting because what we hear a lot of the time is yes, but. That's kind of the standard, it's like, yes, that's good, but. And so with saying yes and, you're really opening it up because every opinion and every thought is valid in its own, right? And then it's like, yes, that's true. And there is something else as well that might be true for me or for somebody else. While if you're saying, but, it's contracting it rather than opening it up. It's putting a negative association on it rather than a positive association, opening it up to what else is possible. So I find that really beautiful.
Absolutely. And there's so many applications of yes and from, yes and rather than yes but, because then we ruin that flow. And reality in itself is constantly moving. Nothing, even in the space of the 10 or 15 minutes that you and I have been sitting here, the multiple, bacterium and viruses that make up our being, our microbiome, and all of that have shifted every few seconds, right? Just constantly changing. And reality out there, if you look at a tree, or how many times have the leaves moved, and is your business the same today as what it was yesterday? No, it's not, because everyone within the business has already experienced one extra day that was not experienced prior to today. And so it's just constantly moving, and the only beings on this planet that are trying to control that and stop the flow of that are us humans. But it's just a specific part of our mind that has this illusion that we're not already safe and that we're not already connected. And so it grasps and attaches to things, and it also has an aversion to things and pushes things away because we have an attachment for things to be a particular way. And so we want it to be like that, and we know we don't therefore want it to be like that. But to tie this back in, what we're trying to do is control the natural flow of reality and life. And we are as that life. Yeah, we are so beautifully already in sync with that natural flow, but there's a part of our mind that doesn't think that we are. And that's the part that's constantly efforting and trying to be better and do better. But if only we could realize that as we are trying to be better, what we already are is so far beyond what we could ever try to be in that sense.
Why do you think it is such a human thing to always wanting to be better, wanting to be more, wanting something else, I guess? There's always this quest for something else that's not here yet. And then if you reach that, it's not that just finishes, then there's something else. And it's a really interesting concept. It feels like a lot of people just never really can be happy with where they are, can be content with what they have, because there's always something else to reach and something else to achieve. Why do you think that is?
So the key question there would be, who is trying to be better? Who is constantly reaching for something else? Who is constantly not happy with where they are, even once they've landed at where they once wanted to be? And behind that question is, who are we identifying ourselves as? What are we identifying with? And so, if I just use you as an example in regards to, I'll use your name, right? So Sylvia, right? If I say Sylvia to you, and who is Sylvia, what comes to mind? And there might be a whole series of thoughts and ideas of the type of person that Sylvia is and how she is in the world and the things she does, and a mother, and this person that plays an important role at digital storytellers, and so on and so on. Sure, we can take ourselves to be that, but if we're taking ourselves to be that, were you that when you were 5? Were you a mother when you were 5? No. But were you still you? Yes. were you working at Digital Storytellers and playing that important role when you were 5? That would have been pretty fucking cool. But no, you weren't. And were you still you? Yes. Okay. And so, it's that part of us, that identity that we take ourselves to be, that is constantly also wanting, it's not happy with where it is. And identifying with that is where we experience hurt, or sometimes can hurt others in that sense. Because if we hold on to the beliefs of that identity, and all of our beliefs have shifted and changed, from the simplest of beliefs that does Santa exist? Yeah. I'd love to still believe that Santa exists, right?
Wouldn't that be nice?
All of our beliefs.
You can. Once you have kids, you can believe it
that's
again
right.
for a few years.
That's right. Values change, right? If we hold on to them too tightly and they get challenged, hence our identity gets challenged, and it will get challenged, then we're going to get thrown left, right, and off center because that has been challenged. But guess what? Fast forward 10 years, and that belief or value is almost 100% likely to have evolved. So, sure, at some point it might be useful to have these values and beliefs, but to hold them loosely, constantly, and to start identifying with our truest nature, our truest being, as ontological beings. So, ontology is the nature of being. Yeah. And that being is prior to being human. Yeah. And so that awareness that has always been there and has always been present to the thoughts of when you were 5 years old, and how they had changed when you were a teenager, and then how they had changed again when you were 20, 30, and so on and so on. That has never changed about you. And that has never thought that it wasn't good enough. And that has never thought or had a judgment about another. And that place also doesn't need to feel compassion in a given moment, because it is as compassion always. If you've heard people say, hey, we should have compassion here in this moment. So are we also saying that there are moments that we shouldn't be feeling compassion? It's conditional compassion. And so it's only if we can start to just distinguish between those two and see the parts of our mind that the persona, the personal reality, the personality that we are taking ourselves to be, that is constantly evolving. It can't be true if it's constantly evolving in that sense. Do you know what I mean? That which is true about us has always been true from day dot, the essence of us.
So you pretty much have to be okay with the fact, like you said before, everything constantly changes. The leaves change, the earth changes, everything we do changes as well. And that's just a part of reality. And then the second thing we have to be okay with is that our beliefs, our values, everything can change and is able to evolve. And that's, I guess, part of the stages of consciousness as well, right? Like as you are evolving as a person, those things change for you as well. And so what's true for you yesterday might not actually be true for you today anymore. But the question that it brings up for me, though, is, let's say if we believe in the fact that we all come to this earth as higher beings, we all have a soul, we've all been here before. If you believe in that, if you don't believe it, then that's okay. Personally, I believe in the fact that we do have a soul, we are on this soul journey, we've all been here before, we are coming back, and we have something to do here on this earth. Like we are here for a reason, we are here to fulfill our soul journey, our life tasks, whatever you may call it. So if you go into that and you're saying we are already enough the way we are, and I agree with you there, because we need to just be content with who we are and remember who we are deep down and who we are as beings. But if we are here to bring something to this world, doesn't that then mean that we are, I don't want to say not enough, but there is still more work for us to do in this life in order to fulfill that? Does that make sense?
I'm seeing where you're coming from. It would also presuppose that being what we already are would mean that we don't do in this world. We don't play an active role in this world. Yeah, there's this presupposition that people have that they presuppose that, well, if I'm not efforting into becoming something more than what I am right now, then how can I be useful or of service in this world? As though we were the ones doing it all along. If we come from our ground state of being, and that simply means our truest essence, right? And we meet every moment from that place and we live from that place, then we are of more service to the world, to others, to ourselves as life than we could have ever tried to have been, or that part of the mind that tries to be good enough for it. So let's play with that a little bit and say that all of our purpose, we might have other ways that we express into the world, and that happens in the form of different missions and roles that we play and so on and so on. But let's say we have a unified purpose, and the work that you're speaking to that is to be done, right, might not be adding to ourselves to be better or become something more. But if there is reincarnation, then each time, and even if it's just the one isolated lifetime, it is to not add, but to clear from the constructed self that we have been mistaking ourselves to be. And as we clear through that, we end up with a thinner and thinner and thinner veil, so that our truest essence that gets expressed out into the world, which no thinking is required for that. When true expression occurs, it happens spontaneously. And when that happens spontaneously, so does the service that we bring into the world, so does any other expression that we have in, right speech, right action, and right because it is simply true in the moment. And we can't dictate what that's going to be prior to the moment. It's simply in the moment, as the moment, with the moment, and expressing through from that true essence. Yeah. And so that work that you're speaking to, it's really reducing that veil, reducing the density of that construct so that more of our true essence is coming through. And when that's coming through, that's just, we couldn't be any more than that. And that might come through in a very practical, pragmatic way. That might come through in the form of a business. So the expression of one's true essence might come through in the form of a business. Often, though, people create businesses that align with not so much their true essence fully, but rather align with the identity and the thing that they've been taking themselves to be. It happened to myself, right? We just went through that little process where I had attended 5 years worth of university to become a physiotherapist, so on and so on. And then the realizations around, well, actually, let's clear from this and what is true expression here? And that journey is still happening here, yeah? It's just the process of clearing is continuing, and grounding into that state of being. The grounding is an incredibly important part of the process, because what happens in the grounding is a stabilization and acclimatization to that true essence, that state of being. So you often hear people having state experiences, right? We call that waking up with integral theory. So state experiences may have been through meditation or dance or yoga or psychedelics, where in a given moment, momentarily, they're seeing reality as it is and not as we think it is or as we are. And as that happens with those state experiences, often people are a little bit like, whoa, that was amazing. Did you feel, that was incredible? Because we've been spending so much time mistaking ourselves to be something else. Those momentary windows, that would not be possible, no matter whether we've ingested something or not. Those experiences would not be possible if we were not already it. if it wasn't already there. It's just lifting a veil or allowing that part of the mind, the default mode network, to go offline momentarily, to no longer have the story of separation playing out so vividly. And that's why you have people expressing sensations of being one and so on and so on. So the stabilization and maturation in that state is incredibly important so that we can take that from being a waking up state experience into something and a place that we can live from in our day-to-day, week to week. And that process there is the growing up. And it's the growing up through the patterns and structures of our mind that have us think that we are not enough or create that sense of separation and so on and so on. And so marrying together waking up, any state experience, including a retreat. Yes, Anne just had a retreat. Everyone for a period of, say, 5 to 10 days, and there's some that are saying that it's still definitely alive, felt like their entire world had changed. And it has. It's shifted it forever. However, to ground that in isolation, it's almost useless. It just becomes an experience that they will once remember. But to ground that with the work, day-to-day work, and it was awesome, the commitment and courage that people at the retreat showed. Every person jumped in for the one-on-one work and are now involved in the growing up process where they are maturing into that state to live from that state on a day-to-day basis and be of more service to the world, to live from a greater place of love and care as they clear through that construct.
There was so much stuff in there, Dan. I've made a lot of notes around that. There was a lot of good stuff in there. I do want to talk about misidentification a little bit more and how people can get away from that and get into their real state of self, I guess. But before then, what you said was really interesting around that as well. And like you said, you've explained it really beautifully at the beginning of the podcast based on your own experience. And I think a lot of the time, people reach something or people work towards something. And then when they're there, they still feel empty and they don't feel fulfilled. And they're like, but this is what I've been working towards my entire life, what it feels like. And then you're there and then you go like, is this actually really what I want? Why do I still not feel anything, And it comes back to this. I think, we also know that a lot of the time people just kind of want to have those goals, but they don't associate the feeling that they want to have at the end of it with it. How do you actually want to feel when you're there? And that's a very important thing to remember. But then also sometimes they just get there and they don't feel anything. So there is still this emptiness, which I guess then brings me back to that misidentification again, and looking at that in our Western society, especially where we are being conditioned from a very young age into being a human of this society, who needs to contribute to this society, who needs to follow certain rules in order to function, etc., etc. So there's a lot of conditioning on there from, our parents, from teachers, from employers, a lot from ourselves as well. I think we are probably the harshest critics of ourselves a lot of the time. But what would be some easy steps, I guess, for people to take in order to start peeling back the layers of that again and try to find their way back to themselves again, to their true essence that's there, that you're talking about so beautifully?
Yeah, I want to speak to an earlier part of what you had just said, which was the expectation around what, a part of what's come from the conditioning, societal conditioning and social construct that we've developed, not just an individual personal construct, but a social construct, is that life is supposed to be a particular way. So everyone kind of has an idea of like, that's what it's going to be like. And when I finally get there and I'm with that particular person, I'm working that particular job or in that particular career, and I have those particular things in my life, that I'm all of a sudden going to feel a particular way. Now, it can play a useful role, but what we need to hold in mind throughout that entire process is that it can also, if we don't hold it in mind, set us up for failure each and every time, which is why the repetition of I got there and then what? I got there and then what? The expectation of how it was supposed to feel or be just didn't play out. What is our expectation of life? How are we supposed to be feeling all the time? I don't think it would be too far off center that some people would say, yeah, I want to feel happy all the time, right? Surely that's not too much to ask for in life, to feel happy all the time. Okay, what are we meaning by happy? Yeah, are you like, oh, wow, every single second of the day? Yeah, versus, and this has come through from my teacher, my coach, an abiding contentment. An abiding contentment. So if we shift that focus rather than that happiness, but well, what's causing the opposite of the happiness, which is the suffering, right? And it's the suffering where we latch onto something being a particular way versus, or not having something be a particular way because we want it to be a particular way. If we let go of that and all of the moving that is life and reality with full engagement in life, but as things shift and change constantly, if we can be, to use another word, so okay with every bit of movement that is happening and allowing ourselves to respond each moment and having an abiding contentment with every moment as it shifts and change, it's impossible for you to be suffering. Yeah, it's impossible. And if you're not suffering, what else do we want from life?
Because I guess the suffering as well, it's suffering and fear also usually comes up when you are living in the past or in the future, right? Because you're either thinking back of things that might have not worked out and, oh, I wish I made a different decision there, or I wish I made a different move here. Or when you're looking into the future and you're going, oh, but what if this is happening, or what if that is not working out? So it's all hypothetical, really. It's not what's happening right here and right now. And actually, my brother just sent me that yesterday, a little quote saying that I think it's about 85% of things that we worry about never actually happen, you know? So why are we inflicting that suffering upon ourselves without there being any reason, you know?
We've forgotten what we are, yeah, and it's every moment that has us, our mind, dash into tomorrow or into yesterday is an effort and an attempt to move away from here and from what we are here as the present here. And it's only because we've spent so much time misidentifying with something else and an idea of oneself that here, and you mentioned emptiness, that someone experiences emptiness, can we call it an empty fullness? The vastness of space. You cannot be any more than that. But the stuff that we've learnt to fill our lives up with, we think that life is supposed to be stuff and things that fill up and not empty. But empty fullness, that vastness, that spaciousness, can we start to re-identify as that? And it feels foreign, even though it is us, right? It can feel foreign and a little bit scary when we're in that space. But as we mature into that state of being, of spaciousness and silence and emptiness and empty fullness, from there, all possibility is available. All possibility. But if we go into something that's already been constructed in an idea as to how it should be, we are now looking at reality through a straw. Can we get comfortable with that? And to bring this back to what are the first steps? Because we're talking some big stuff. It's big stuff and it's not big stuff. You know, people can practice it right. Like a sitting practice, or we call it sitting practice at YesAnd and with the coaching room and so on, because meditation is a highly loaded word. We're all practicing presence, yeah? And not practicing presence as though it's not already here. It's just simply being here. Can we stop leaving? Stop leaving and moving away from what we are. here present, and just sit for 5 minutes and notice the mind. Just start anything, and it can be incredibly innocent, such as, oh, I'm going to put the kettle on after this. Or, oh, I'm just going to make sure I do that afterwards. Or, I can't believe that person said that yesterday. All of that is moving away from what is here right now. But we're so not used to being here right now. And just, can we give ourselves the opportunity to climatize and adapt and mature into that space? So sitting and simply being here.
And just feeling what's coming up for you, right?
Seeing what's coming up, allowing it to come up without any engagement. If a thought comes through, don't attach to it. Don't let it take a seat. Comes up and it goes away. No one has brought a thought in and then decided for it to go away. It's simply, it arises and it falls away off its own accord.
But that's interesting when you're saying on its own accord, because what I find as well, it's if you're accepting it, then it falls away. But if you're attaching to it or in a negative way, going like, oh, but I don't actually even want to have that thought. Like, why is this thought coming up again? I don't want that. That's when it usually stays. But when you're accepting it, being like, okay, that thought's here, at some point it's leaving you again. It's the attachment onto things that actually makes things stay.
Yeah, definitely. Because pushing something away, just like pushing a car down the street, adds energy to it. And if you're adding energy to it, then it's just only going to stay alive in that sense. And we can go a step further there, Sylvia, around the acceptance part, because the acceptance part in itself can add fuel to the fire in the sense that it's more commentary around it. Yeah. Can we notice what's coming up without any commentary? Yeah. And then it'll simply flow through as you do watch, the flame of a candle. It moves. We aren't accepting that it's moved this way. As we're watching it, we don't accept that it's moved this way. Like, we don't add commentary saying we've accepted that. Oh, I don't want it to move that way. We've simply, with abiding contentment with however that candle and flame decides to move, can we do the same with ourselves? Yesterday, I was working with a client. We were chatting about how, as humans, we tend to place expectations upon ourselves first and then project that shit out onto others as to how others should be in the world. What if we sat there and watched a tree grow from when it was next to nothing in the ground to its full maturity, and you see a branch start to pan out in one direction, and we sat there going, oh, could it go more up? I'm not quite sure if that looks quite nice going down that way. How ridiculous. How ridiculous if we sat there doing that. We're watching nature and we do not judge it any which way it moves or shapes out to be. It is beautiful. We are that very same thing and could only ever recognize the beauty in that if it is already present within us. But again, we have misidentified ourselves not to be that. And so can we just remember, right? We don't even need to learn anything. There isn't anything to learn. Can we just remember the pieces, re-identify with what we actually are, not this who, this identity, the thing that we keep speaking to ourselves as an I, as an I, as an I. I want to add, so there's that sitting practice that we spoke to, and we're speaking to clearing this construct, clearing the layers and so on and so on. Just noticing, when I use the word I, what am I referring to? What am I referencing? Like, who is that I? And who's wanting that? And who is saying that it should be this way or that way whenever we say that? Yeah. Who do I think I am? And who do I think others think I am? And to realize that whatever answers come up is all just an idea and just a construct in that sense. Yeah. Because to even use an idea as what we are, right? Like to put a few things together is such a confining practice and bottles up something that is so vast, which is, the nature of what we are in that sense. So just start to notice, where is it that I feel tension? What situations and contexts do I feel tension in my body?
You're talking about the ego construct there, right? Like when we are acting out of our ego construct, how would people realize that they are acting out of ego? What is something tangible, something practical, something that we can realize, oh, this is actually not really me, this is my ego talking, and how can I get out of that?
Yeah. First thing would be to not try and get out of it, because that would mean that some part of us believes we're in it, and it would create a lot of efforting and trying, just like you're trying to get out of a car or get out of a hole or something like that, right? It can feel like that, and it can feel very real in that sense, and it's what, we would refer to as, and Roy Bhaskar's work would refer to as, a demi-reality, which is quarter real, just like a dream feels so real until we wake up. And that's the same with, this life and this misidentification. Feels so real. What do you mean that doesn't, that anxiousness, that overwhelm, that stress? What do you mean that's not real? I'm feeling it. Until we wake up and realize the ridiculousness of it, and we have a beautiful laugh to ourselves with love and compassion. So there's only ever one of two states that we could be living from, and that is a state of contraction and tension and so on, or a state of expansion and openness. And so that keeps it really simple, right? Go throughout your day just noticing, okay, I'm driving in the car and the car pulls out in front of me and a thought comes up. That guy's an idiot that he's just pulled out in front of me. And then a feeling really quickly associated with that. Is there tension in your body? And if there's tension in your body, then that is the energetic signature of the ego construct. And so in that moment, you don't even need to try and think your way out of it, because thinking your way out of something that thinking caused in the first place would be like trying to dry yourself using the ocean. And so simply soften. And there's no magic trick to softening. The body knows how to become at ease. We drop our shoulders, the muscles around the eyes soften, the face softens, the jaw drops a little bit. Just soften and let go. But do we have the strength in the face of the ego to let go? Or does the pull and the urge of the ego to continue on and going, no, this is bullshit that person just did that, right? And it's never useful to come from that place. Yeah, it's just simply never useful or true to come from that place. And anything we say or do from a state of openness will be more true than from a state of contraction and confinement of the ego construct. And so just noticing that in your body, and at first when people practice noticing this, and just write it down for yourself, and maybe spend 5 minutes at the end of every day looking back at the day and being like, okay, what was a moment or situation that had played out today where there may have been a little bit of tension, and write that down. Write down what the situation was and where in your body did you experience that tension, and how would you describe that sensation? Was it heat? Was it tightness? Was it a twisting? And soon you'll end up with a map, a somatic map of different contexts that your thinking and behavioral patterns tend to get triggered in, and you'll be able to recognize these easier because you've been mapping these out, and you'll find yourself in the context and that feeling will come up and you're like, oh, I know this one. And I've
had this one before.
And that gives you a split of a second, more time and space, which opens up a world of possibility of a new way of responding rather than the way you have reacted every other time.
I guess, and it also comes down to awareness. Once you're aware of it, once you're aware of your triggers, you still have those feelings come up, but it means you're learning how to work through it and how to get through it quicker rather than be dwelling in, those uncomfortable feelings that do come up for you.
It's such a good point, because people often think that, with all of the work that we might be doing in the one-on-one coaching, that they're expecting very quickly that they're going to just not feel triggers anymore. And then after the first 3 months, people are kind of like getting really down on them and being hard on themselves, because they're like, they're judging themselves for experiencing a trigger in their body. There's this bodily response to mum, dad, family partner, whatever it might be, colleague. If we can separate two parts of that, if we can notice the trigger come up, but not have the usual outward external reaction that we normally have. Maybe it's something we would normally say reactively, or something we would do, like slam the door, walk away reactively. If we simply don't have that happen anymore, or have that happen in a more useful way, that is a huge part of the work. The triggers internally can come up all day long. They don't have to come out externally. That doesn't mean to suppress it. Suppressing it or repressing it would mean pretending that they aren't even coming up internally in the body. You can literally take a seat, sit there, and watch that trigger playing out in the body. Watch it fully. Go to the epicenter of where that is playing out in the body and explore that. And not with any commentary, but simply guiding your way into where that's playing out. And if you let that play out, let that energy run through your body without any attachment to feeling differently or aversion from that energy, next time around in that context, it will not arise to the same magnitude again. It will still arise, but not to the same magnitude. And if you have the diligence to be in full watchfulness of that energy running through your body each time that trigger happens, and it's not necessarily the easiest process, right? When you're in the ego construct, or when that state is playing out and you're in first person perspective and it's huge separation between you and the outside reality and the world, giving yourself that moment, just stop. If you don't do anything else, then just stop and pause and see what becomes available with that spaciousness. Even if it's a decision to take 30 minutes for yourself, take 2 minutes for yourself, to take a deeper breath than what you were taking 2 seconds ago. And then again, see what's available for you. And then again. Beautiful example here, right? Just today, right? Something came up with an email and I had a preconceived idea as to how the email could have gone out in that sense, but I didn't communicate it, right? And I saw the email go out and I was like, and like I ran up and I was like, Sarah, could we do it this way next time around? So on and so on and so on. But I brought all of this energy that wasn't necessarily necessary in that sense. And Sarah communicated to me. She was like, can you say that in a different way next time? And at first, I just kind of felt like, I was just communicating what I wanted to communicate, so on and so on. Sat down, literally 60 seconds later, I walked back up, and that space gave me enough time to walk back up, open the door, say, hey, listen, I apologize for bringing all of that heightened energy into it. Absolutely right. I could have communicated that in a different way. And that's it. It's as simple as that, and we don't have to roll around in it, right? But it's practice as well. It takes practice. It's a lifelong practice.
I just want to say it's a huge piece of homework for all of us. I think it's not something that comes easy to any of us. Your example was just beautiful, even you are going into that state sometimes being like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe I could have said that differently, It takes a lot of practice for all of us, but it's worth it. And it can really make your life and your interactions and your communication with other people, as well as with yourself, a lot kinder and a lot more appealing, I guess, and more
compassionate.
Beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the service of not setting unrealistic expectations, right? It's not as though, oh yeah, cool. So I jump into one-on-one coaching, or I'm doing this work, and then my life becomes, exactly what I always wanted it to be, blah, 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 blah. It's a spectrum. And so can we identify the situations where we're not being so useful or effective and behaving in the way that we'd like to? And can we experience less of those and have more of the others? Yeah, spend more of our time living from that state. Yeah, and less of our time from the ego state. And that spectrum hopefully just continues to shift, where there'll be, even when we're feeling like, hey, I've got 98% of this thing called life sorted out, and it might arise still, maybe less in mind and simply more in body. Oh yeah, cool. To not be thrown by the fact that that's still arising and the expectation that like, hey, I thought I was sorted kind of thing. So yeah, be soft with yourself first and an allowance with that. And that will really then, only by doing that and letting that softness and love for oneself occur, that will then be transferred out into the world automatically. Yeah, if we focus on that and then bring that love into our expression and interaction with all others, including non-human beings.
That was beautiful what you just said there. And I think it's a great spot to finish our conversation for today, I think, and wrap things up, because we've been talking for about an hour now. Then the 3 main pieces of wisdom. There was a lot of knowledge and wisdom that came through today from you, but the 3 main things that really stood out for me and that I think are very important for us to take on our journey is the first one: reality is constantly moving, and that is outside of yourself, but also inside of yourself. Like you said, nature is constantly moving, but then also you as a being are constantly moving. And I think being aware of that and being aware of the fact that you are not the same person tomorrow as you are today is a really interesting concept and something that, we should be thinking about a bit more, because it allows us to grow and to expand and to be different and to just go on this journey without any judgments. The second one is a huge one. It's all around the question, who am I? And the question around misidentification, who are you identifying as? You ask the question, who is Sylvia? Who am I? If you ask yourself that, am I only telling myself the answers that I've heard from my parents, from my teachers, from my colleagues, from my outside world, or am I able to listen into myself deeply enough to really know who I am and to really know what the true essence of my being is? I think that's a really, really important one to look at. Listen to yourself, sit down, quieten down, be present in this moment. Don't think back to the past or to the future. Just sit down and feel into yourself. Who are you? Because we all know it deep down inside. It's just uncovering it again, piece by piece, I guess. And the third thing that came up was around the fact that we can only live out of 2 states, really. And it's either you're living out of the state of ego or you're living out of the state of love. If you're living out of the state of ego, you are feeling contraction, you might be feeling anxiousness and weird, funny feelings that are coming up when certain things come up. While if you're living out of love and if you're doing things out of love, things are meant to be easier, things are meant to be flowing, and things are meant to be going your way a bit more rather than in a contracting kind of tense way. So those 3 would be the 3 things, the main 3 things, I should say, that I've taken away from today, that I think that we should all put into our little backpack of life and take on our journey with us, because they're super, super helpful. Dan, thank you so much for being part of the Soul Sunshine podcast today. Like I said at the beginning, it's been a while in the coming. I've always wanted to have you on this podcast. I have really, really enjoyed our conversation today. We could keep talking forever. We might do one down the track again about another topic. But thank you so much for taking the time today and for gracing us with your wisdom and with your knowledge around this really deep topic, that I think is so important to, just bring to the world.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on the podcast, Sylvia, and would like to, honor and acknowledge the incredible work that you're doing in providing this platform for others and really being an avenue of beautiful work, including your own. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Dan. So we have mentioned a few resources as well, and I will put them into the podcast notes. If you're interested in the work that Dan is doing, you can get in touch with him via the website yes-end.com.au or on Instagram under yes_end_co. I know Dan is very popular, like he's very full with his coachings already, but if you can't get a spot with him at this point, there is also a whole team of coaches under the Yes End umbrella who are all amazing, incredible people. So yeah, any of those people would be amazing to work with if you are interested in the integral development coaching. Just get in touch with them and yeah, see what you can do. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I really hope you got something out of this episode today. I really enjoyed this conversation with Dan today, going into some very deep places again, like always with you guys. There's so much information, so much knowledge. My head's always exploding a little bit and I want to learn more and I want to hear even more about those topics. So I hope the same happened for you today. Please do share your podcast with your family, with your friends, or anyone you think might benefit from this information or is interested in this topic. Obviously, the more people that can hear it, that can listen to it, the more people it can hopefully be of service for. I really hope this episode brought some sunshine to your soul. I'm sending love and light your way, and until next time.